It's Derby Day in North London. Second place Arsenal takes on Tottenham in the biggest Premier League match of the week. You can watch it live today at 3 Eastern, only on Peacock, which is where you can see this show. Download the app if you haven't done so. He is Mr. 500. He is Jim Nantz, the Hall of Famer, called his 500th NFL game. He'll be on the call. Ravens-Bills with Tony Romo coming up in the AFC Divisional Playoff game. Kickoff at 6:30 Eastern on CBS. Hello, friend. How are you?
Hello, friend. Listen, forget about 500. I'm excited about 501. All that fanfare behind me, thankfully. It's been a dream journey to this point, and they get better every week. Buffalo hosting Baltimore this week. It's 501. I can't wait to get there. And I'm, as always, tickled to be on with you leading up to it.
More to gain, in your opinion, Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson in this game?
And you're going to be talking individual accolades here. And I can tell you that knowing both of them well enough to know this is all about trying to get to the Super Bowl for them. So if you say Josh has more to gain, it's only through the lens of getting to a Super Bowl for him. He's going to be happy with whatever it takes to get there and try to return that franchise for the first time in 30 some odd years. But then you got Lamar, who's had his best year ever, doing just jaw-dropping things as well, but he wants to get to a Super Bowl. So that's a tough question to answer because they both feel like this is the year. And I could give you a pretty compelling argument why I think either one of them are very capable of winning the Super Bowl this year.
What was it like? Who was Jim Nantz? Game number one of the 500.
It was Vinny Testaverde and the Tampa Bay Bucks at Chris Chandler and the Indianapolis Colts. The great Pat Hayden was with me on the call. It was October of 1988. I was the studio host for our college football scoreboard show back in those days, the Prudential College Football Report. I worked in the studio in New York on Saturday, parachuted in for the game on Sunday, doing all of my production meetings and all of that research by phone. So I didn't have the full treatment, as you will, on most occasions, getting ready for a game. The night that I flew in after hosting the studio show was the night that Kirk Gibson hit the home run in the World Series. And remember the Jack Buck call on the home run? I can't believe what I just saw. I can't believe what I just saw. Well, last week was number 500. And as I look back at the scope of it all and the good fortune I've had to be at so many big games in my career, I could truly say, just like it was uttered that very first weekend for me, I can't believe what I just saw.
When's the last time you had announcer envy?
All the time. You know me well enough to know that maybe I'll look at things differently. I admire so many people in our industry. I know it's a competitive business. I've never felt like it from that viewpoint. I admire so many people that I hear and listen to. I was watching TGL last night and listening to Matt Berry calling golf. I knew he was a golf guy. I don't know Matt really barely at all, but I was admiring what a good job he did. It's a tough situation there in a made-up environment with golf and into a simulator, but it's all the time. You know my deep respect for those that came before me, and you know that, like, the elder statesman for me now is Al Michaels, and listening to Al do a game last week, I just love hearing his cadence, his voice. He's been such a magnificent friend in my life, someone to look up to, and still a kick every time I talk to him, which is frequently. But the other thing that was brought to light last week on the 500, Dan, was that CBS has this history with the league. We're the original network partner of the NFL. And go back to the 50s. Think Alan Amici. Think of that game, the Giants and the Baltimore Colts. And that was, Chris Schenkel back then. But you look at people that actually called games play-by-play at CBS at some point in their careers, includes Al Michaels. Al started it. Bob Costas was a play-by-play announcer for a year or two before he went to NBC. But Summerall, Lundquist, Inberg, those last 10 years of his career. Kurt Gowdy ended his career at CBS. This is a dangerous game, by the way, because you start going through all the. Jim McKay did games for CBS on the NFL. Jack Whitaker, of course, Ray Scott,
Yeah.
Frank Gifford. Um, I mean, it is Dick Stockton. People don't realize he called the second most NFL games of all time. Had a great Hall of Fame career. Frank Gleber, a name that's forgotten, but he was a long time number two behind Pat. Um, I felt a little bit of, I felt connected to them last week. I was the first to reach 500 games play by play. Now, it was surprising. Somebody did the research on it. Pat Summerall did 700 games in his career. Some of them were at Fox, most of them were at CBS, but some of them were as an analyst when we were young kids. So his play-by-play numbers at CBS never reached 500. And I just felt honored to take the torch and try to run with it and set a new mark. And then you know what? I had enough of it. It's been discussed. I'm honored and flattered to be given the chance. And I'm ready to go do 501 this week, 502 next week, and put the fanfare behind me and go watch some great games.
Is there an emergency plan? I don't want to jinx you guys. An emergency plan if you're not able to do the game.
At the Super Bowl, there is. I've never seen an emergency plan put in place in advance of that. But we're worry warts, those of us who make our living with our voices. And, when I work as many weeks in a year as I have for 37 years, I was working close to 48 weeks a year between college basketball, the NFL, and golf. So, of course, you're going to have your battles along the way with a cold or the flu. And how are you going to get through it? And you worry yourself about being around anyone who is sick. My little boy, I have a young son, Jameson. He had the sniffles last night. He said he had a sore throat. I mean, it's just, I had all the guardrails up, still trying to interact, put him to bed, say his prayers, sing a nighttime song. And thankfully, he felt better this morning, but I started to do the math on it. 2 days from now, I could have whatever he's starting to come down with, and I'm going to go into this weekend compromised. Um, but we do find a way to survive it. Anything that's short of laryngitis, we're pretty much going to tough it out. I could hear in Troy Aikman's voice the other night. I could hear something was going on with him. There was a hoarseness that I know he wasn't 100%.
He's Jim Nantz, the Hall of Famer. He'll be on the call 501. Don't bring up 500 to him. It's the Ravens and the Bills, the AFC divisional playoffs. Go back to the last time the Super Bowl was in New Orleans. And when you first got an inkling that there was an issue with the power outage.
Hey, Dan, I got to give it to you, brother. You come up with the best questions. Just no one like you. So obviously, I'm not ready for that answer if I want to really give it a thought, but it's just easy. Okay. I was there with Phil Simms. It was like 9:38 to go in the third quarter. The Ravens had the football at roughly their own 43-yard line, and there was a Flacco handoff, and there was a run up the middle, and all of a sudden, all my monitors went just black, complete dark. And in my headset, I can't hear me finishing the call. I was in the middle of a call. So I just thought there was a power surge in the booth. But, right after that, of course, in a millisecond, you realize the lights are out. The whole thing's coming down. The whole broadcast is probably off the air. I mean, you had to do some quick processing about what was happening. So I have no link to the truck. I can't hear from the producers. I don't have any visual cues. We're all in the dark, figuratively and literally. But my cell phone was working. So I called Lance Barrow, our producer in the truck. Now, that was a dumb thing to do because he was just as, I'm sure, he was more in the center of the storm than I was, but he didn't pick up. But I was trying to just, hey, what's going on? And then I thought, let me call Melissa. You guys all know Melissa. She's been my chief of staff for a quarter of a century. And I called her cell phone and said, "What in the world is happening right now?" And she explained that we were knocked off the air. You had all kinds of really not so good thoughts at that point. This is 2013. You're wondering is it a terrorist attack? You hate to
Yeah.
even say it, but you don't know what it is. And as you know, it took 35 minutes before everything was restored. And that overshadowed really what was a compelling game right down to the wire. People forget San Francisco had 4 plays inside the 10-yard line in the last minute to try to win the game. 4 incompletions. Kaepernick on 3 of them to Michael Crabtree, all defended and incomplete. It was a game that was in the 30s. It was a one-score game, and no one remembers that. All they remember is the night the lights went out in New Orleans.
I also remember Steve Tasker being pressed into service as sort of the guy on duty. He was like the night watchman, and his microphone was working, and he kind of was hosting the Super Bowl.
We could not find, well, first off, the studio show is in one of those collapsible sets that takes 4 or 5 minutes to get it standing. And JB and all the crew were hurriedly getting into place, but you were looking for someone to be able to be on mic and to help carry the moment. And Phil and I had no line of communication. We're still out, and Steve filled in brilliantly.
You got paid for a full game, though, didn't you?
I should go back and look at it. But can I tell you a secret? Honestly, I would pay to do the game. That's the dirty little secret. I could say it now. I've got a long-term contract. I mean, you know what? I've always been forthright about it. I would do all of this for free.
Romo said that he would.
I mean, as long as I could have a house and be able to provide for my kids and everything, it's never what it's about. It's about, well, partly it's about fulfilling a big part of it, fulfilling the childhood dream, to be a voice, not to be the story, but to be the storyteller and be able to attend these events. And, it's all a gift. It's about legacy too, Dan. That's why when I look at happenings sometimes in sport, let's take what's going on in golf. And some have left the PGA Tour. I'm not going to get deeply into all that, but you have to make a legacy decision at some point.
Yeah.
You've been blessed enough to be given the chance, and you probably made a few bucks along the way. What is it really about for you? Well, it's about being able to say that you've lived out your dream, and this is what you did. It's about legacy. And that's how I feel about it now that I'm reaching these certain milestones. They come a little bit more frequently with longevity, that's for sure, these days.
Let's go to Tony Romo, get his thoughts. Tony, Jim says that he would work for free. How about you? Would you work for free?
Well, I mean, Tony, I've certainly made enough money all this time, so yeah, I think I could provide for myself and about 37,000 other families. Yeah, I'd do it. Yeah, I think I would.
Okay. That's Tony
that.
Romo.
It's great to get Tony engaged in the show right now. He's my guy. I love it.
Tony.
We have so much fun.
Tony.
Tony!
Now, if Romo can't do it, Seton, I think, could be his understudy.
I don't know. What are they going to do? You want to run it here? You want to pass it? What would you do, Jim?
Dayton, why don't you make your way up to Buffalo this weekend? We'll have you in the bullpen.
My guy, I'd love it. I'd love it.
If you look back, though, can you extract one moment that would stand alone over everything else that you've done? When you speak of legacy, one moment, whether it's football, basketball, or golf.
Wow, that's you're talking about one event, one game call, or one thing that I had to be at. Well, the most special thing of all will always be April 12th, 1992. Nothing can ever top that for me. Well, there is one thing. I'll get to that maybe in a second here. But that was when my old dorm suite mate at the University of Houston, Fred Couples, won the Masters. We used to have these crazy dreams that one day he was going to win the Masters. That was That was all about legacy for him. That was his life goal. And of course, by this time, first day I show up on campus, I make the declaration that one day I want to work for CBS. Like that's going to happen. Um, Fortunately, it did. Blessedly, it did for me. But his dream was to win the Masters. My dream was to one day broadcast the Masters. And I also wanted to broadcast for CBS because I love the way they presented the NFL. Raised on a heavy diet of, let's say, Summerall and Brookshire, Summerall and Madden. So in our dorm room, you know the story, Dan. Not every day, but on a couple of occasions, along with Blaine McAllister, our great roommate, who had a spectacular career, won 5 times on the tour himself. We used to practice the green jacket ceremony. Just kids, make believe, dreaming, just imagining something, opening up your mind what that moment could be like. And I'm sitting there in a dorm room, room 101, Taub Hall, Taub. It's now been raised. But there we are, Fred's sitting across from me, and we're doing an imaginary interview. He's just won the Masters, and I'm hosting the presentation. So in 1992, that actually happened, except we weren't in dorm room. We were in Butler cabin, and the world was watching. So how do you beat that? There's only one way that could ever be bettered for me, and that's when my son Jameson wins the Masters, and he comes in the Butler cabin, and I say, hello, son, and goodbye, friends. That will be it. That's the last show. Not to put
That's a walk-off.
But that's how outrageous it would have to be to better that moment for me. But
Nope.
other than that, listen, last year's Super Bowl, went 3 seconds shy of 5 full quarters, the most watched television show in the history of American television by a lot, not by like 1%, by 12%. 203 million Americans watched at one time. Normally, I don't even care about that. But now that we're walking around with the belt, the championship belt, I'm making believe here. Now, it was a great game. The broadcast, thankfully for our production team, it won the Emmy. So proud of the 1,000 people that presented that day. And in all those years of doing the NCAA tournament, there are just too many to isolate. And back at that little place in Augusta, Georgia, Tiger, 1997, a win for the ages. Fast forward to 2019, this scene plays out again. The return to glory. And Tiger is walking off the green and he's hugging Charlie, his son. It's in perfect symmetry with the scene we had seen 22 years before when Tiger walked off the green, breaking all the records in the history of Augusta. Youngest champion, largest margin of victory, the 72-hole scoring record, youngest ever. And there was Earl, his dad. If you GPSed it, I would say that it happened on the exact same spot. Earl hugged Tiger. 22 years later, Tiger hugs Charlie. It went from a father to a son. And now the son's the father, and he's having the same moment with his son. If you're in the storytelling business, it's about as rich as it gets, about as high drama as it gets. Thankfully we're on camera because, there are shedding a few silent tears along the way as all that's happening. If you have a heartbeat, you realize the gravity of that moment.
Great to reminisce.
I love reminiscing with you. I'm wearing something here. I know they've got a lot going on out there, but this is Bel Air Country Club's shield, okay? And Al's a part of that. I've been fortunate to be a part of that club for a long time as a member. We have a lot of our families out there that have lost their homes. It's a lot. There are many, unfortunately, lived in the Palisades. And what's going on in LA, I don't want the story to we get numb to things like this. These are families, these are people, lives. We're up at the 26 is the death toll now. And I'm just, as I said, signing off on Sunday from Buffalo after the Buffalo-Denver game. LA, we're thinking of you. We're praying for you. And really tough times. We're out here talking fun and games. That's real life. And people's whole entire lives have been uprooted. Life savings, starting from scratch. in the middle of their lives, and maybe later in their business careers, whatever. It's all gone. And it's not just because it's 3 days and we're tired of the story, let's move on to something else. It's real. And I'm just thinking of all my families out there that I know, many of whom you would know, Dan, and it's just indescribable.
Have fun this weekend. Thanks for joining us as always.
I'm coming to see you this summer, by the way.
You are?
I'm going to knock on your door up there.
Whoa. Okay.
I know where you are now.
Do you want to come in for a Meet Friday?
Into that studio right there?
Well, this is Maine.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm coming to Maine this summer.
Okay. Well, it's not Butler's cabin, it's Danny's cabin, but we'd love to have you. That's awesome.
I don't need to be on the air. If you need an emergency, you talk about emergency fill-in. If maybe a guest doesn't show up, I'll pop on for 5 minutes. But I'd like to see the studio. But better than that, I'd like to go out and have a lunch with you afterwards. So I'll find you.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. All the best.
See you, bud. That's Jim Nantz, Hall of Famer. Take a break. We'll play in or out after this. Robert Griffin III will stop by as well.